Torchlight Independent Media presents Grenada's only source for independent, unbiased, and well-researched broadcast journalism. This is the Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb.
Hello and welcome to the November 21st edition of the Bubb Report. Over the last 2.5 weeks, world leaders, climate activists, fossil fuel interests, and other partners gathered in Glasgow, Scotland for the annual United Nations Conference of Parties Summit. The annual summit assembled against the backdrop of multiple scientific reports and prima facie evidence that the crippling impacts of climate change are about to get exponentially worse for the developed as well as developing countries. The world's leading climate scientists, for example, warned that there is only 12 years left for global warming to be kept to a maximum of 1.5 degrees, beyond which even a half degree will significantly worsen the risks of drought, floods, extreme heat, and poverty for hundreds of millions of the Earth's inhabitants. Barbadian Prime Minister Mia Mottley put this urgency of the climate emergency into an existential context for countries in the global south.
And I say to you, there is a sword that can cut down this Gordian knot, and it has been wielded before. The central banks of the wealthiest countries engaged in $25 trillion of quantitative easing in the last 13 years. 25 trillion. Of that, 9 trillion was in the last 18 months to fight the pandemic. Had we used that 25 trillion to purchase bonds, to finance the energy transition, or the transition of how we eat, or how we move ourselves in transport, we would now today be reaching that 1.5 degrees limit that is so vital to us. I say to you today in Glasgow that an annual increase in the SDRs of $500 billion a year for 20 years, put in a trust to finance the transition, is the real gap, Secretary General, that we need to close, not the 50 billion being proposed for adaptation.
We must find a smooth transition towards a low-carbon economy. There is no planet B. There is no planet blah, 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 blah. This is not about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging or blah, blah, blah. Build back better, blah, blah, blah. Green economy, blah, blah, blah. Net zero by 2050, blah, blah, blah.
The outcome of the summit was a mixed one at best and can't be described as a roaring success for several reasons. Firstly, the summit was not able to accomplish the key goals of ending fossil fuel subsidies, or phasing out coal, or putting a price on carbon, or protecting vulnerable communities, and delivering $100 billion in climate finance commitment. Secondly, the summit was also unable to get a commitment from the world's largest polluters to follow through on some of the major commitments tabled at the Paris Climate Summit. This week on our program, we speak with one of Grenada's representatives who attended the event, Senator Simon Steele, about what the outcome means for climate vulnerable countries in the Caribbean. Also on the report, we discuss the state of men and boys in the region in the wake of the observance of International Men's Day 2021. The observance, founded by Trinidadian history lecturer Dr. Jerome T. Luxing in 1999, was held under the theme, quote, "Better Relations Between Men and Women," unquote, for 2021. We will honor the positive contributions that men has made to Grenada and the region as we discuss the challenges facing men in the 21st century against a backdrop of changing definitions of what it means to be a man and changing societal norms with respect to the role that men should play in society. We welcome our guests, Bubb Report co-producer and independent consultant Kitaka Mawuto, UE IGDS Ignite volunteer Darren James, Simon Steele, Grenada's Minister for Climate Resilience, and Kwesi Davidson, Gender Program Officer with the Ministry of Social Development. We thank you for joining us. In a few hours, the Prime Minister of Grenada is expected to hold court with some media personalities in what has become a curated series of press events. I trust that the selected few reporters and media personalities would satisfy the public's need to know by asking probing and open-ended questions related to government's plans to cushion the negative impacts of runaway inflation and high fuel prices, or even the sticker shock that some in the national community has been experiencing recently as a result of the recent hikes in their Grenlec utility bills. Further, the country is also on the verge of presenting another pandemic budget under the theme towards Vision 35, protecting lives, safeguarding livelihoods, and investing for growth and resilience. At this evening's event, one should anticipate also an accounting from the country's leader with respect to the impact of the previous budget. Perhaps we should also look at the receipts from the Public Accounts Committee as a guide for what was spent, how it was spent, and to what effect, especially against the backdrop of the fiscal reports from April, May, and June of 2021 that demonstrated government successes in earning more revenue than what was initially projected at a whopping 175.9 million EC dollars, coming mostly from customs and excise, collections, and remittances. Too often, some in the media lack the temerity to ask the tough questions of the nation's elected officials, either out of fear of reprisals or concern that they may lose access to said elected officials if they simply do their jobs. And on that note, I wish to welcome Grenada's Minister of State with responsibility for climate resilience and the environment, Senator the Honorable Simon Steele. Good morning and welcome to the Bubb Report.
Hi, Kellon. Good morning. And good morning to all your viewing and listening audience.
Absolutely. Let me apologize again for the state of the internet here. But Senator, you just came out from the Glasgow summit. How would you rate the success or failure of the summit for us as a small island developing states?
Well, there are two measures. One is at a global level in terms of what was achieved. The second is specific, as you point out, to small island developing states and climate vulnerable nations such as ours. In terms of the outcome, I think it was the best possible deal that could have been struck at this time. It left still a lot to be done, but it's important to understand that that Glasgow, that these COPs, these annual climate meetings, aren't set up to solve all of the issues in one sitting. It is a process, and the global focus is on ensuring that global temperature rise does not exceed 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And the roadmap for that has two major milestones. One is to 2030, so effectively halving global emissions by 2030, and they call this the decisive decade. The second is 2050, which is where countries are supposed to reach net zero, which means they eliminate as much carbon as they produce. So, as I said, net zero by 2050. So, in terms of what Glasgow set out, it was to keep that 1.5 target alive, and it managed to do that just. The science, as you outlined in your introduction, tells us very clearly what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and by when. And the outcome of Glasgow adhered to that just, literally by our fingertips. And that is based on the global dynamics, those within the G20, the 20 richest countries in the world who generate 80% of global emissions and constitute 85% of global GDP. They're the richest countries and they're the biggest emitters, down to their actions and the dynamics and the politics that sits within that group. So barely enough was done to keep that 1.5 alive. But that wasn't all Glasgow was about.
Yes, Minister. Yes, before you proceed, but would it be fair to say, I mean, given these lofty commitments that especially countries in the global north went into Glasgow with, I mean, some are suggesting that it was a colossal failure. Certainly, obviously one has to also put into the context what was accomplished. No one is suggesting that was not good, but the global north's inability to make big commitments to countries like Grenada with respect to climate finance, for example, we've seen a shortfall there, or with respect to commitments on damage and loss, we've also seen a shortfall there. How then would you say that it's successful?
Yeah. So, as I said, it was the best outcome that I think could have been achieved at this time based on those dynamics. We went into Glasgow with a massive gap, and we've left Glasgow with a gap. But the desired outcome was ensuring that there is a path to close that gap and continue closing that gap. So, as Greta Thunberg, the Swedish activist, stated, again in your opening, blah, 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 it's words. And it's very difficult to translate the battles. And it is warfare there in terms of arguing over words, arguing over text, arguing over numbers. And it's difficult to translate that in a meaningful and tangible way to vulnerable nations such as ours, who are on the front lines of climate change. So in terms of what this means for islands such as ours, on the climate finance piece, where it failed was to hit the commitment that was made back in Paris, and the Paris Agreement back in 2015, which was from 2020 through to 2025, developed countries will provide $100 billion per year of climate financing to vulnerable countries. They're yet to meet that target. So you could say that they failed, they're close, they're getting closer, but those promises are yet to be met. The latest is that by 2023, remember this was supposed to be by 2020, their aggregated, their collective contributions will be equivalent to that sum, but that's kicking the can down the road. Where there was a positive,
and that's the point.
If I can, Kellon,
yes, please. Please address me as Dr. Bubb, Senators. Dr. Bubb, yes, but please proceed.
Okay, Dr. Budd.
Go ahead.
The piece that was achieved, and Grenada played a very proactive role in this, together with other islands, was the doubling of adaptation finance to vulnerable countries. So adaptation finance currently stands at about 20 billion per year. That's been increased to approximately 40 billion, which will trickle down as challenging, as slowly as that may be. But that was a major outcome. two other things. You spoke, well, there was the presentation by Prime Minister Motley in the opening, and she spoke of calling on developed countries to allocate their, what they call SDRs, as special drawing rights. This is money, basically money that is printed by rich countries. They call it quantitative easing, which generates trillions of dollars, of which a significant portion of that has been used to support the economic recovery of developed countries. And what Prime Minister Motley was calling on was for those wealthy countries, specifically the seven richest, the G7, to provide a greater portion for support for developing countries. And text, and again, Grenada, Barbados, we worked together to get text approved within the agreement, which called upon those developing countries and the financial institutions, specifically the IMF, to work toward making this happen. That was a successul outcome for us. Again, words, it has to be translated into action, but that is a significant achievement. And then the other piece was recognition of our special vulnerabilities. It spoke to the need for special considerations to concessionality and eligibility of middle-income nations, which many of us in the Caribbean are falling within that bracket. And it's a battle that we've had for 20 or 30 years now, calling on the international community to recognize those vulnerabilities and factor those in terms of the financial terms and financial assistance that we received. Again, text was for the first time included in the agreement, which speaks to those vulnerabilities. And again, the Caribbean, ourselves and our brothers and sisters represented, we made specific petitions leading up to Glasgow, and text again has been reflected in that agreement. Again, words, and there are other parties that need to follow. But these words matter. So those were some of the successes.
Yes. Now, John Vidal, he's an environmentalist. He works in the activist space like Greta, but from a different generation. Writing in the Guardian newspaper last week, he said, quote, "The UN climate process must be reformed to become more nimble. It is slow and measured and requires consensus and compromise. This is usually admirable, but it works against the scale and speed of action needed in a global emergency like this, when millions of lives are at stake. And every year is a year of inaction that occurs," unquote. How were Caribbean leaders able to communicate the urgency of the climate emergency beyond, again, as you said, words, and of course, stirring speeches from the likes of Mia Mottley and former President Obama, who was also there? How were you able to communicate that urgency? What did diplomacy look like for the region as part of the Association of Small Island States?
So it's on two levels. So one are those words, those speeches. We're given a platform, a global platform that is equal to any other country. And across the Caribbean representation that was there and other representation from small island developing states, were very coordinated and very pointed in expressing our special circumstances and the need for greater consideration and greater action from those developed nations. But in addition to that, and Grenada played a very unique role in this COP, where we had a seat at the head table, part of the negotiating process. Grenada partnered with Denmark. Countries were paired off, developing countries. Just a handful of ministers of the 200 environment, climate change ministers that were there, only 15 were selected to do this role. Barbados, Jamaica Jamaica and Antigua also played a role in this. But the level of representation as co-facilitators, meeting with all countries, large and small, being able to facilitate the negotiations, be able to follow in the agenda that is supportive of vulnerable nations. And we played a very, very critical role in terms of the positive outcomes that came. In addition to that, Grenada specifically, I co-chaired together with the Marshall Islands a coalition called the High Ambition Coalition. This is a unique grouping that has been credited for the positive outcomes of the Paris Agreement and the establishment of 1.5 as a target. Myself and my colleague from the Marshall Islands co-chaired this coalition, which is of developed and developing countries, a unique format. It included the United States, the European Union, as well as developing countries. And we were progressive countries, and we were able to apply significant pressure, both in terms of the negotiating process, to the UK presidency, and then to other partners or other parties, countries that had a role to play. In addition to other bilateral conversations, I had access to President Obama. I had both spoke to him on a one-on-one level, in addition to a round table with just 4 other countries represented, speaking of the needs of islands. John Kerry, who led former Senator Kerry, former Secretary of State, who is the US Special Envoy, Presidential Envoy on Climate, who is the lead negotiator for the United States, one of the most significant, if not the most significant party. Again, multiple bilaterals, one-on-one engagements, team engagements, and again, access to be able to explain the importance of adaptation, the critical nature of that. And I believe that part of that engagement led to the agreement to the doubling of adaptation finance. Mm-hmm. So having this level of access, also to Frans Timmermans, the lead European Union negotiator, China, India, incredible access that Grenada was able to, and again, other small island developing states were able to have direct access and explain and influence the process. So what we were able to achieve here in Glasgow maybe can only be compared to what was achieved in 2015 in terms of the establishment of 1.5, the role that the High Ambition Coalition played there, the role that vulnerable states played there. So as vulnerable states, with Grenada playing a pivotal role, we really stepped up to the plate. We really showed leadership on a global level.
Mm-hmm. Now, Minister, what specific deliverables did we come away with from the summit as small island developing states, more specifically Grenada?
As I said, the doubling of adaptation finance. Adaptation finance going from 20 billion to 40 billion. That's shared amongst many, many developing nations. Right. But our share of that will be a direct benefit. I talked about the vulnerability recognition. I spoke of the SDRs, which is billions of dollars. You heard in Prime Minister Motley's call, those special drawing rights are trillions of dollars. We've asked for a small percentage of that, which is billions of dollars, which again will have, which down the road will have benefit. Where we were disappointed is on the issue of loss and damage. Again, you mentioned that in your opening. Loss and damage, we had some very specific proposals. Loss and damage speaks to the need for financial support that goes beyond adaptation support. There is only so much action that can be taken by countries to adapt to climate impacts. You can minimize the losses and the damage caused, for example, by a hurricane, but you cannot eliminate the damage. So it is what happens there and the consequences of that and the financial support that's required for that additional financial support. And that speaks to the issue of loss and damage. And this is an issue that's very prickly. Developed countries are nervous because that can run into many billions. If not, you look at a single hurricane hitting an island such as Grenada could cause $1 billion worth of damage in a matter of hours. And islands, whether it is in whether it is in the Caribbean, whether it's in the Pacific, whether it's in Asia, cyclones, it is hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage. And that, again, doesn't speak to the slow onset events, sea level rise, communities that are being impacted, loss of coral reef, loss of mangroves, droughts, floods, all of those issues. How do we monetize that? And we had an agenda, very specific agenda, which called for the financial resources, or establishing funds for financial resources, which was not granted. Other things were, there's something called a Santiago network, which was approved, which provides additional technical support for islands such as ours in terms of disaster planning, disaster recovery, which has value, but does not speak to the many, many billions of dollars that will be required. But we moved that agenda forward. It's firmly placed on the agenda. It will be firmly on the agenda for COP27 that takes place next year. And that conversation takes place, but it's not an easy conversation. But it's one that we hope will accelerate and lead to something more tangible.
Yeah, I imagine those conversations would not be easy, certainly very difficult. For countries like Grenada and Barbados and countries in the South Pacific. I mean, I have some colleagues from the Pacific Islands, the Marshall Islands, for example. We're talking about places like Maldives. These islands are sinking, right? And part of that is that we are not responsible for a lot of those global emissions. The global north is. But Minister Steele, let's segue into Grenada's own record with respect to climate resilience and environmental preservation. Certainly, we have to hold the global north accountable, but we also have to hold ourselves accountable. Now, what do you think the government of Grenada's record looks like with respect to environmental preservation? And I'm asking this, of course, against the backdrop of the lack of a land use policy in place that allows development to happen in some very ecologically sensitive parts of the country. I mean, places like Lasajas, Mount Hartman, and Livera, they have come under increasing scrutiny because of the massive hotel development projects that are taking place there. But the point is, how do we ensure that we can have that balance? Yes, that balance of tourism development with environmental preservation.
Well, I will start, first of all, with Grenada's record in terms of climate resilience, building climate resilience. There are a number of major projects that are either on stream being implemented or in the development stage. The first, one of the flagship projects, is the GCF-funded and German government-funded water resilience project, the G-Cruise project, which is valued at $125 million, a significant project, which will address the issues of drought or serving our drought-prone south, how we can collect, store, and distribute our water resources with increasing instances of whether it's extreme flooding, short, intense periods of rainfall. How can we capture that? How can we store it and distribute it to serve us in those drought periods? And that's not only to households, it is to the tourism sector, our hotel properties, our farmers for agricultural purposes, etc. So this is a highly transformational, highly impactful program that Grenada has been successful in securing and now implementing. This is a model that the GCF are now using for other small island developing states. So we're demonstrating leadership there. Whether it's in our Climate Smart Cities program, this will be valued somewhere in the region of $350 million, a significant project which looks at whether it's the Carénage, whether it's Grand Anse Beach, whether it's Grenville, whether it is looking at renewable energy efficiency, whether it is our urban planning, road systems, and other nature-based, ecosystem-based programs, community-based programs. So in terms of being able to show the vision, accessing the technical support, that now needs to translate to the financial support. But again, we have support from the Green Climate Fund, technical support from New York University, financial and planning support from the World Bank, the IMF, in terms of programming that, plus other partners who will be coming on stream. In addition to whether it's coral restoration programs, mangrove restoration programs, whether it's other resilience building programs, the St. John's River project, which is redirecting vulnerable parts of the river that are vulnerable to flooding. We know the impact that has on the River Road area, again, due to climate impacts. Whether it's work that has to be done on the Molyneux Road, again, water ingress will have contributed to the land slippage there, and other programs around the country. So significant focus, significant resources are being brought to bear there. Now, coming on to your point in terms of conservation and preservation, there is always, not just in Grenada, but the world over, a tension between development and conservation and preservation, and how that is best done. Because we need to do the both at the same time. We need to be able to develop our economy, develop it in a sustainable way, taking into account environmental protections and ensuring that it is done as environmentally, ecologically friendly as possible. But there are always tensions in all projects all over the world. And what the government of Grenada is trying to do through the processes that are in place, there are criteria set out in terms of planning, whether that is through the extensive EIAs that are carried out, understanding the to
Yes, Minister Steele. Again, I apologize. We're having some really terrible internet here, and you would think people in Grenada complain about flow. I'm sure you also probably complain about the internet in Grenada as well, but that also happens in first world countries. Yes. So yes, Senator. So I have two final questions here. One has to do with implementation. Now, when we're thinking about just climate finance, what does implementation look like? Say, for example, if a hurricane were to strike Grenada, what does implementation look like, for example, for any kind of disaster mitigation funds that you've alluded to that the country would need in those very intense moments?
Well, from a finance perspective, there are measures that have been put in place, fiscal measures. Grenada was the first country in the world to introduce hurricane clauses with its creditors. So in the event of a hurricane, in the event of an extreme weather event, the interest payments, principal payments to our creditors will be suspended for a given period, where those outgoing revenue flows to those creditors can be redirected inwardly to support the disaster recovery. So that gives us both breathing room and financial resources to assist in the recovery process. And as I said, Grenada innovated with the World Bank, was the innovator and the first country to do that. Barbados has now adopted that. Jamaica has now adopted that. So as Grenada has led the way there, there are other contingency facilities that are in place that again can be used for disaster response, disaster recovery measures.
Mhm. Now, Minister, finally, well, I have one final matter which doesn't have to do with climate, but we will touch on it if you choose to. I know you might have to go, but that is about the blue economy. Now, in September 2017, the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute critiqued Grenada's blue economy approach as one of blue washing, uh, analogous with greenwashing. In other words, they claim that the promotion of the blue economy looks good on paper but do not necessarily deliver on environmental and social benefits. They go on to ask this question, Senator Steele, quote, how will the proposed physical developments under the blue economy protect valuable coastal and marine ecosystems, which currently provide the basis for key economic sectors and livelihoods related to tourism and small-scale fisheries, and serve as a key natural infrastructure that reduces vulnerabilities to climate change and natural disasters, unquote. What say you?
I don't know the report that you've just spoken of, but the blue economy
Mhm.
is a well-established concept, again, globally by international institutions. Grenada is a leader in this front. The blue economy speaks to whether it's fisheries, tourism, coastal programs that are both sustainable, that speak to protection, conservation, but it also speaks to deriving the economic benefits from this natural resource. The talk now is in terms of our healthy oceans and the role that they play in terms of a carbon sink. Our oceans are significantly more efficient carbon sinks, absorbing carbon dioxide, that gas that is the root cause of climate change, than our forests. So how can we not only ensure that our oceans are healthy and productive, but how they can be monetized in terms of their value as a carbon sink, as forests have been. So it's not about blue washing. It is not, this isn't a fudge. There is science behind this. There is, that there have been credible studies in support of this, and great ocean nations such as Grenada, such as the Caribbean region, such as regions supporting other small island developing states. There is huge potential here. But the challenge has been, how do we translate that from something on paper in terms of theoretical potential through to true economic and environmental benefits that countries such as Grenada can draw upon. And that is why Grenada has pushed forward, is a leader in helping to define what the blue economy means, how that translates into tangible benefit for our ecosystems at a national level, and for our people, for our economy.
It's nothing to do with climate, but that has to do with some might say it's a tiff, others might say it's a storm in a teacup. I'm sure you would propose that it probably was a storm in a teacup, and that's when the newly minted Senator Rolanda McQueen accused you of bullying in the September sitting of the Senate. How do you respond to that? I don't think we got a response from you publicly. So Senator McQueen made lots of public appearances with respect to that. I was privy to the exchange. I saw the entire exchange. I felt as if media reporting on this was not necessarily justified because they really did not report on what the substance of the conversation was. And it was an important conversation in which you were attempting to clarify some statements that were made by the two new senators as a senior senator in the Senate. So I want to give you the opportunity to give us better context to what transpired in the Senate, sir.
Well, those viewers of yours who know me, I'm not into petty gutter politics.
I'm aware of that.
That's not my style. I focus on substance and what is to the benefit of our people and to the country. That's my focus. Some may say that's a little boring. Some may say it's a little too academic, but I focus on the substance. So, I don't want to get drawn into the pettiness of this. other than to say that in terms of that exchange, and it wasn't just with Senator McQueen, it was with other members of the opposition where they were not engaged in the substance. They weren't addressing the legislation that was on the table that we were debating. They got lost in their own political agendas. And it wasn't bullying. I'm very clear, I'm very frank, I'm very direct, as one should be. This is, our time is valuable. This is the people's time. This is the people's parliament. And I just felt the conversation needed to be redirected to the matter at hand. And the senators on the other side could not speak to that. I'm not even sure if they read it. But they had missed the point. So was it bullying? No. Was it direct? Absolutely, and it should be. It wasn't disrespectful. And if other members wish to take this in another direction to hide or to distract from their own ineptitude or their ignorance of the material that's actually on the table, I can't help them. That's their contribution. But I certainly will not be responding to stuff that isn't appropriate and for the Senate and isn't relevant to what is being discussed. So if taking a no-nonsense approach is viewed as bullying, then so be it.
Well, Minister, for us here at the Bubb Report, we believe in balance. And the reason I ask you this question is because I felt as if the reporting in Grenada on this was not necessarily balanced. It's sort of, I pick up something and I run with it, right? So I felt it was important to get you on the record on this issue. So,
well, I don't seek out the public's attention for pettiness. If I have something meaningful to say and something of substance, I would not seek out the media as others did on this subject to blow something out of proportion or distract from what's on the ground.
Well, yes, you have a point, but at the same time, I think media also has a responsibility to clarify and bring serendipity to the issues as well, as we have attempted to do here this morning. But Senator Steele, before you go, any final thoughts? We have a budget coming up. I'm sure you're probably busy preparing for that as well. So any final thoughts, any closing words from you before you leave, Senator?
No, well, specific to the budget, I'll leave that to the Minister of Finance to outline. The nation will hear on Friday what the government's plans are for 2022. These are very challenging times. I believe as a government, we have achieved a lot in these difficult times. And there is a lot more to be done in the year ahead. But the Minister of Finance will outline that. And I will have my chance in the Senate to present and defend that budget.
I would certainly be listening to the deliberations. Full disclosure, I do listen to every Senate sitting. I listen to you in particular because you come across as very professorial and scholarly, which is needed in the Senate, I think. So
I'm following your guidance.
All right. Okay, Senator Steele, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report. We certainly would love to have you back for other climate conversations, for other environmental conversations. These are important conversations. They are not necessarily what we call sexy for the media, but I believe climate change is an existential issue to the Caribbean. It is a serious development issue that needs to be addressed. So, Senator Steele, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, listeners and viewers, stay with us. We will be right back.
Since losing that seat, what have you been up to?
Now, Mr. Attorney General, this particular provision sounds unconstitutional. But why were there not consultations before moving forward with the proposals? Did they say what will happen when you guys get to St. Vincent? Because there are pressing socio-economic issues that I would want to address with you. In the hyper-information age of social media, the Bubb Report knows there is more to the story. We have questions and demand answers. We strive to hold the powerful accountable and tell an unbiased, contextual story. You know what happened. We let you know why it happened. There is always more to the story. The Bubb Report, streaming every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube.
This is the Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb.
I am a man. I make mistakes. I am not always right. I don't always have it figured out. I am a man. I am tired, overworked, stressed and frustrated with life. I am a man. I am broken. I am sad, disappointed and afraid to look myself in the mirror. I am a man with 5 kids, 3 women, no income, only a bottle of rum. I am a man. I love women. Well, not really love. I love to have sex with them. I am a man who is afraid to admit to all the things I just said. To everyone else, I am a boss, a test, a top dog. I feel so much pressure to live up to the expectations of me. I am crying inside for help, but no one hears my cries. I am hot, and I hurt others. I am in pain, and I bring pain to others as well. I wish it wasn't so hard for men to open up, to say what we feel and what we are going through.
Welcome back, folks. Let me apologize. I keep apologizing for the quality of the production today. We having some serious internet connectivity issues here. This is in the nation's capital, by the way. And we complain about Flow, I believe, and the other service providers in Grenada, but they can be just as bad here in North America as well. But at this time, we have our Men's Day panel, and I'm happy to be joined this morning by Kitaka Mawuto, who is a consultant and my very hardworking producer. Welcome, Kitaka, to the Bubb Report.
Thank you, Kellon. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Mr. Kwesi Davidson, who is a gender program officer in the Ministry of Social Development in St. George's, and Mr. Darren James. Darren James, who is joining us from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Darren, I hear that you are from the great community of Laventille.
Indeed, I am. Thank you for having me.
Do you have any Grenadian heritage? They say half of Laventille is Grenada, you know.
I actually do have family living in Grenada.
You do? Of course. Yes. So welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the report. And we want to get into a conversation here around Men's Day. So, Mr. Kwesi Davidson, I want to start with you. With respect to what the vision is in your ministry with respect to men, what does that look like?
Okay, so good afternoon to you, Bob, to you, Kellon, and all your viewers here today. Men's interaction, or you say as it pertains to men within the Division of Gender and Family Affairs, is a fairly new thing. If you realize over the years, most of the focus have been on women and women's issues, right? But we have been championing for the inclusion of men within programs and programming geared towards as we said, we could develop programs for women, so why we can't develop the same programs for men? So what we're doing now, the division and as myself, we have in the pipeline the launch of what you term as a men's desk. And a men's desk will, look at all the different issues, programming, and other programs that will be suiting or just have a fit for looking at men issues, right? Um, in terms of the International Men's Day activities and the International Men's Day experience per se, um, from since I entered into the ministry, like since 2012, we have been trying our best, to have men's days and men's issues, become on the forefront. Looking at men's activities and looking at the at least this one day, this single day where we can say, okay, we're going out there and supporting the positive aspects of men, because more times we have been hearing about the negative issues that our men and boys are lost, or our men and boys are not, or just looked at in a negative light. So we try to champion the cause where we could have this specific day. Although we do activities right throughout the year, we want to highlight, or we saw the need to highlight this day to look at men's upliftment. So we're looking at encouraging men to have better health seeking um activities, encouraging men to look at you know the psychosocial problems of men, because we just tend to look at just the physical problems, or men's strength and men's health and men, you know, different chronic diseases. But what about the psychosocial issues men goes through? And if you really look at it and look at the data, most of the issues that turns out to be violent sat at some sides of psychosocial aspect. Looking at the way that we grew up and the myths that we and when I say myths, we speaking about the cultural in the windows out there that say what a man should be. A man should be strong. A man should never take back chat.
And
A man
right,
should.
and you are preempting that conversation, because we will have that
Mm,
conversation shortly.
right, right.
But I want to bring back my colleague Kitaka here. Kitaka, uh, you posted a video. Unfortunately, our internet is not allowing us to play the video in full. But about the definition of masculinity, you seem to have gone out of your way this year to really help us reimagine and rethink what masculinity is, which certainly is different from what a certain pastor, Stanford Simon, said in a sermon, that men who have nice nails, or men who don't work in farms, are certainly not masculine. There was this perception of masculinity as still having particular machismo. So if you're not doing manual labor, that does not make you a man. If you do not speak in a certain way, that does not make you a man. If you're not vulnerable, if you don't show any vulnerability, that does not make you a man. If you go for mental health support, that does not make you a man. So, Kitaka, tell me, how what have you been doing to sort of change that mindset that we have in the Caribbean with respect to the definition of masculinity?
Well, I mean, you said a lot there. That's a lot to digest. But for me, I think that's those sort of ideas are part of the problem. Because I think it's a real facade and it's a hard task, and I think the video addressed that. Where men are not able to even really accept where they truly are, because you have to continuously be performing and putting forward an act of strength and power and dominance and control, even when inside of you is being eaten away by the pressures of life, and I think it has a situation where a lot is being swept under the rug, a lot is not being dealt with, and then at the end of the day, we have massive blow-ups, which causes ripple effects in a negative way across the scope of all our society. Families are becoming dysfunctional. There is the domestic violence issues, violence against women, men suicide rates, men dying from health issues that could have been prevented if they had spoken up earlier on and said, "Hey, I don't feel well, I need support," and not just be like, "I can, I can do it and I can make it." So I think like this shows us that definitely there's a lot of work that needs to be done to redefine what it means to be a man. Because I think what has been the definition before misses the mark completely, and it's very challenging, and it's actually anti-life, because we have emotions, we feel pain, we feel a lot of the things that we may say it's not manly, and we experience stress, we experience trauma. So pretending to have it all figured out and all together only pushes us further away from getting the help we need to truly heal ourselves and to transform ourselves and to be healthier in society and to be able to make a better contribution. So that's basically why I see it, Kellan.
And Darren, let me bring you here. Men in that neighborhood, the Laventille neighborhood, that you grew up in, have always had a bad rap, right? Anytime you hear Laventille, you don't think of anything good that comes out from Laventille. But fun fact, two of my mentors during my doctoral journey at Howard University were from Laventille. Another friend of mine who is doing well as a small business entrepreneur in the United States is also from Laventille. You are from Laventille, okay? And so there are these positive stories of young men from Laventille who are thriving. Yet we don't hear those narratives, right? We don't hear about these positive stories from young men in Laventille. But can you put into context Men's Day 2021 for us, please?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. So the question is, I want you to put in context the significance of this year's Men's Day in the context of these negative stereotypes that we hear about men from communities such as yours.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I also have slow internet and just give me a little dip.
Right.
With International Men's Day, really look to highlight the experience, the really human experiences that men go through, and that we unfortunately suppress, as your colleague was just explaining, and the importance, how shall I say, the activity of consciousness raising and bringing these stories, or the acknowledging the good that can come out of Laventille, the good that has came out of Laventille, is really important to give inspiration to those who really need that push or need that motivation, need to acknowledge that yes, I can do good even though I am from here. So activities like these, if we can spread the story of myself, your two mentors, so your two lecturers, I believe, on your doctorate.
Yeah, advisors. Yeah.
Advisors. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Advisors. These stories and these inspirations, these acknowledgements on these days, the as well as acknowledging the parameters of which they came out of, on the whole of within International Men's Day's context of looking at what men have been through, men can go through, and helping these individuals in these areas acknowledge that they have within themselves certain biases and stereotypes and oppressions surrounding them. Young black man with plaits, I as well have plaits, with plaits, cornrows, however you like to say it, wearing certain types of clothing, belong to clothing, and so on, that they can overcome these stereotypes, that they can overcome these oppressions, but from what angle? And the angle of acknowledging within yourself first that yes, I am a capable young fella, I'm a capable man that can overcome, that can change, because it all begins with that internal change and internal acknowledgement and processes to come to that change, to acknowledge these certain things and oppressions, and push out of these stereotypes and come out of these areas.
That is a very good point. And let me bring back Kwesi here. Kwesi, and I'll bring back Kitaka as well. When we contextualize issues of men for men in Grenada and the Caribbean at this time, I mean, the list is long, and we can look at them. We can look at issues of alcoholism. We can look at issues of absent fathers, right? We can look at issues of domestic violence. We can look at issues with respect to mental health, right? Mental health is a big one. Mental health is still very taboo in Grenadian society. If a man decides that he wants to get psychosocial support, that might be perceived as weak. So, Kwesi, tell me, if you will, what does your support look like in trying to really address some of these issues that I've just rattled out?
All right. So within the ministry itself, or should I say within, let me kind of, within the system, there is support for, well, say people at all levels, right? So there are counselors and psychologists, like development, who deals with the adults. Then to go further a bit with the system, there are like guidance counselors in the then there are persons based
Okay, I think we're having some connectivity issues there. But let me bring in Kitaka on the same question. Kitaka, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
All right, should I
Yes.
go ahead?
Okay, Mr. Davidson, it looks like you cleared up a little bit there. So please proceed.
All right. Okay, so I'll just try to make it brief, right? So within a process where we have psychosocial units, which deals with most most and all the psychosocial issues that pass through our ministry. But what I wanted to say a while ago is that the issue of men not seeking help. Men do seek help, but they tend to seek help in the wrong ways per se, right? They don't seek professional help. As you say, they probably still see that as taboo. And most times, the help that they do seek, the persons themselves are not that au fait, or they just don't give them the right type of advice. So they tend, to probably continue down the line that they are already, or probably escalate and get worse, right? So one of the things we ask is for persons to seek professional help. Don't wait until things get too, uncontrollable, where you tend to, to spiral out and and escalate into something that head make you head down a path that is not all that okay in life.
Kitaka?
Coming in on, as he broke up for a bit there.
Yeah, he did.
So you can just recontextualize the question, and I'll be able to jump in.
Yeah, so again, I rattled off a list of issues that men are confronting, and you mentioned earlier about just trying to reframe how we view masculinity and men and things like that. And we have issues of absent fathers, we have issues of abuse, we have issues of just mental health. Mental health is huge, right? We're talking also physical health. physiological health and what that looks like. So there's several issues that men are confronting in this period. So I'm saying the question was, how do we provide support as those who have the capacity to do so to address these issues that men are confronting?
Well, a very critical starting point for me is creating that safe space, wherever it may be, for men to be safe and feel comfortable to actually express what it is. Because sometimes we're not even sure what the real state of affairs is in terms of the issues that our men are experiencing. Because you're not able to open up to your neighbor because you're in your news or the information about your life will be on the street. Your girlfriend may think you're soft or leave you. So I think like wherever men are situated right now, like the people around have a responsibility to, in this present context, provide a safe space where a man can feel well. He can really remove his armor and be vulnerable and say, I am here. This is what I'm going through. I don't want to be here. I want to be here. How can I get help to be here, to be where I want to be? I think that's a very critical start. Um, for me, I think also we have moved away from that whole community socialization aspect of our society, which I think was very critical, where we have where we had a certain level of accountability in the community, and everyone played a role to support and grow each other. Not by deepening some of the things that would have created the problem, but by being loving, supportive, caring to each other. Because I think, in all honesty, love and care and support, it really goes a long way to create an energy that is very conducive for someone to make a change. And I think that most men don't have access to that. It's work hard, make money, pay bills, and just take care of everything. And sometimes you don't even have time to just kick back, sit down, reflect, reassess, and move in a different direction. So I think those two things are very critical. I think we are trying a lot of other things, a lot of the formalized, institutionalized forums that are created. I don't think it really attracts, men to really come forward on a heavy level. I think we have to actually go where men congregate, go to the bars, go to the blocks, and not in a very systematized academic way, but in a real, relatable way where they can really feel safe and be themselves. I think we will be more effective with some of the strategies.
And that grounded approach, you're right about that grounded approach, right? I think sometimes we love to see these policy prescriptions on paper. They look good on paper, but implementing it is another issue. So you have to go where the people are. I noticed you didn't mention the barber shop. I wonder why that was.
Well, I mean, come on, Kellan, it's very obvious. Long
All right.
flowing.
Mr. James, let me bring you back in here, brother. Um, can you resonate with the points that Brother Kitaka just made here?
Yes, of course, of course. I'd love to actually add the approach in which you approach these discussions with men is very, very important. Because in the approach, I realized that a lot of men, when my activist work and line of activist duties, I realized the approach that a lot of men like is very informal, relaxed approach. Hey, my brother, seeing, ting. You see, as a lecturer told me the other day, Creole is our first language, and approaching in a language that they resonate with can really begin the conversation and make them see a conversation they would love to have, even though they may not agree with a lot of the things that you'll be saying, because masculinity, or toxic masculinity itself, is very hard. Encouraging persons to give up certain powers or certain privileges is very hard. Any kind of privilege is very hard to give up once you really get accustomed to it and really loving it. So to begin the conversation and approach them in a very open manner, in a manner that they can express themselves, even though we may not disagree, express themselves, have them feel heard, feel listened to. As a very, very important. The approach is very, very important to be in any conversation. But in this line, when people will actively resist, that approach is very helpful as well.
Now, Darren, let's unpack something you said. You mentioned toxic masculinity. Now, a lot of
Yes.
folks might say that you're woke for talking about, because woke has certainly become a bad word in a popular culture nomenclature. But unpack the notion of toxic masculinity, if you will, because there are some who believe that whenever you mention toxic masculinity, you are trying to emasculate the notion of what it means to be a man.
In beginning, that toxic masculinity, we can easily describe it as these beliefs or these actions really harm others. Because masculinity is in itself, it's innately not bad. It's not terrible. It's when we begin to practice these behaviors that impedes on the rights and the safety of others. So, for example, something as simple as in a relationship, in a marriage, I should say, some because there's a very real instance in Trinidad, a very instance in my family as well, where the man is the head of the household. He is the breadwinner. The woman is not allowed to. She can do anything, but she cannot work. She can do a lot of things, but she is actively banned from working. So ideas like these are very harmful to both because now you could have had a second income to the household. Now you just don't want a second income. Why? Because this notion of toxic masculinity makes you feel if she works, you are no longer a man. You're no longer the head. You're no longer in charge. And these ideas, these notions, many of them really do bring about an oppression to women. One's on top, one's on the bottom. And that's the toxic masculinity. That's the idea behind this woke culture. The toxic masculinity, when we say that, is these things that you're trying to beat down. It's not the idea of being masculine or being a man you're trying to beat down. You can be strong, pump iron, do this, do that. But when you start to look at it as pumping iron to diminish other persons who do not pump iron, to say I am buff, you are not buff, you are weaker than me, you are lesser than me. That is the ideas that we try to take away or to, reduce in society, not have at all from now on going forward.
Mm-hmm. And Kitaka, I want to bring you in here on the same idea of this toxic masculinity trope that some are calling a trope, but which Darren was able to articulate so well.
Well, I mean, I think for me, I mean, it's labels, and the label is a container for some ideas. I mean, obviously, we do have a situation where, certain culturally accepted and socially accepted values and norms for what masculinity is creates discomfort and issues for other people who are outside of that circumference. So definitely, I think there is need to redefine what that is. Like for me, I know that I can be assertive without being disrespectful. I can set boundaries without causing harm to others. And I think, we need to open up to realize that we definitely can redefine that and have a certain level of love, care, respect, and value in the masculinity that guides how you interact with the world as a man. No one is trying to take away that from you. And I think, that is very, 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 very important. I mean, growing up in my community, I know the pressure that I was under to break my mean or to have sex for the first time. Guys in the community would look at you and not respect you if you don't have a girlfriend or if you're not having sex or if you don't have multiple women, and okay, yes, I am going, let's say I followed what they said and went out there and was a conqueror of women and got respect from them. What about
The
the women?
village ram.
Yeah. What about the women that got hurt? Hearts were broken and families were destroyed as a result of my sexual prowess. And I think it's just a call for a greater sense of empathy and care and concern for those who we interact with. So that yes, you can be a man within the confines of safety where you do not negatively impact the individuals around you. And I think when we talk about toxic masculinity as opposed to healthy masculinity, is you can be a man, but not to the expense of hurting, causing pain, suffering, and destroying, the lives of those around you, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Davidson, what are your thoughts?
I just wanted to add on that a bit, right? What we need to do is try to have some sort of understanding, open up our open up our minds to things more. Let's say for instance, as Kitaka mentioned, growing up in the Grenadian context, you see things and you tend to believe that's normal. It's not until you probably get older and then you get a greater understanding of what really happened. Um, like for instance, growing up in my area, they used to have like a lot of fights and so forth going on. You understand? It's like the more dominant male. When guys used to come to visit their girlfriends and so forth in the area. They had to run out because the guys in the area think, okay, that girl shouldn't venture outside, or that guy shouldn't venture inside of the community. That girl's supposed to be ours, right? And then you grow up with that type of mentality, and then you're not exposed to anything else. You tend to believe that's what life is, right? So, as a society on a whole, we need to open up our minds, right? Um, the context or the information that we've seen out there, sad to say, is all geared towards women. You hear about women's rights, women's empowerment, um, being a strong woman and so forth. Because the women's movement has been looking for avenues and areas for like the last 20-25 years to help improve women. But then what are the men doing for themselves, right? You may hear a male group come out this year, you hear them for 2-3 years, then you don't hear nothing about them again. There are unions in churches, but then the men's union in the church is focused on whatever the teachings of that church and so forth is. So we need to come out as a society on a whole, or as a nation, and try to help build and encourage men to look at things differently. We know that things won't happen off the bat just like that, because there's a lot of deep rooted societal norms and so forth that we have to work through before that can happen. But there is one thing, well, in the line of work that I do, there's one thing to know and there's one thing to be a professional. So once you understand what the need, or what it means to be a professional, and you look at all your and you look at yourself internally and you understand things, you believe me, even if you're the most educated persons, you will still have some kind, deep rooted um, myths and beliefs that you have within you, right? But you need to understand, or you need to find a starting point where you can say, boy, you know what? I've been looking at this thing in a certain light all the years of my life. Let me try to look at it differently, right? So when you look at like for another example, I grew up in a household where I had my mother and my father. And to me, it's only as I got older, I started to hear about, the things about the man supposed to be the breadwinner and so forth. I didn't have that type of experience growing up. My mother worked, my father worked. My mother will bring home stuff, my father will bring home stuff, right? They both pay the bills. Everybody do what they have to do. So I didn't grow up with this type of idea that I had to be the breadwinner. Although learning from others' experience or growing up in the Grenadian context, I still have the thing in the back of me. But if I cannot afford for myself, and right now my child, I don't feel comfortable, right? But then again, there's nothing wrong where you probably end up in a relationship where the woman is the breadwinner, or where she is the one that goes to work, or she makes more money than you. As a man, you should find, instead of feeling uncomfortable, you should to try to embrace that and see and probably find a way where both of y'all could live comfortably, right? So it's things like that, and we may look at it here now as the larger issues, but there are some smaller issues that we need to work on first before we get to that point. Like issues of how, as we mentioned before, how do we reach the men to get them to understand what masculinity is, right? How do we get them to understand how to accept, you know, the you know how to accept the issue of seeking help, seeking proper professional guidance. You understand? And to add to that, sometimes or most of the times when you hear about issues that men go through that probably, get them in trouble or in jail. When you look at it, it's like something simple, right? They growing up. Anytime they had whether it's an issue at home or an issue at school, the parents are the one that always deal with the issue and never give that child the opportunity or the guidance to say, okay, this is how the issue is supposed to be dealt with. So when you're a child and you're given trouble, quote unquote, and the parents are always the one who deals with the issue and sometimes deals with it in a way where you look at it and you say, when I grew up, I go deal with a teacher like that, or I go deal with whoever else like that. You grow up believing that that is how you're supposed to go through life dealing with things. And at the end of the day, it's after you get into trouble and you sit down and you reflect, then you say, boy, no one really showed me a different path. No one really, is after that they say that people don't know the law until they get in trouble because we don't put the extra effort to go over there to find out what the law is and find out, we hear about, let's say, a term that everybody know about, gender-based violence. And persons only tend to seek information on the topic when they have an essay to do, when they're in the school system, when they're in university and the topic comes up and they have to write a paper, or for some reason is some kind of academic something, but they or probably they end up in a domestic violence situations themselves or someone close to them end up in that type of situation. You don't, well, maybe it's a good thing because I might be working 24/7, 365 days of the week, right? But you don't find people coming out there randomly, just, okay, I heard about the topic and I want to know how I could, go out into the community to share the word and so forth. They always wait on, well, maybe coming from my background or within the work that I do, I always say that they always wait until the ministry has some kind of program or some sort of intervention or something to say, okay, well, we coming out there to get some sort of information or so, right? So that is one of the things that we need to do. We as a people and as men on a whole, we need to, instead of sitting back and waiting until stuff happens, we need to go out there and try to get information, right? So you may, like, probably the men on this program right now, you may hear we bring up the issue of toxic masculinity. Go do the research, find out what it is, get some sort of interpretation and look at your life and see whether or not you are prescribing to that type of toxic masculinity or you have a healthy type of masculinity or if you're somewhere in between. The first, it all starts on you understanding where you are and
Some
looking
personal
at,
responsibility.
some
Yeah.
personal responsibility and looking at where you need to be. Right? That's the first thing. You need to understand at what point you are, and then it gets up to your own um, beliefs that, okay, do you need to be where? Do you want to stay where you are, or do you want to get to somewhere else?
All right, folks, what we want to do now is to take another quick break, and we would come back for some closing comments. Kitaka, I have to credit you for getting this conversation going, and you're someone that always, have your feet planted onto the ground in Grenada. So I want to thank you for really getting this conversation going. This is an important conversation that we need to have, and we'll be right back. Stand by.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenada.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not favorable? You don't know the terms.
You know, we love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean.
If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm gonna live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? You've said gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. And what we want to do is to go over to the panel here for some closing comments. Where do we go from here? What does the agenda look like? What would the agenda look like for men in the 21st century, especially in the context of Grenada and the Caribbean, where we have so many issues that men have to deal with it? So Darren, I would start with you over there in Trinidad and Tobago.
What I would say to move forward now is continued conversation, to continuously bring up these topics, consciousness raising, bring it to consciousness, as well as encouraging men to engage in introspection. As I said before, it begins with looking within yourself and understanding of what about yourself can harm others, what about yourself is has this toxic masculinity. Introspection, continuing conversations, two main things I believe, as well as the approach. The way I approach my friends, always holding your friends accountable. How I approach my brethren, something as simple as you see someone in your car, stick with the head cat call and say, "Hey, partner, not in my car," and you begin the conversation like that. Because introducing the conversation like that breaks the ice from what could be a contentious situation to something as simple as I engage the conversation by first saying something playful. Now we're going to start with the actual conversation of why it is wrong, why it is bad, and why you shouldn't do it. How can I feel to someone else? Introducing the perspective of someone else. Now, I'm not a woman. I don't have the lived experience of a woman. But from what friends have told me, it's on their end, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't come off good a lot of the times, almost every single time. So introducing these perspectives, the conversation, introspection, all these things is a good way in an activist standpoint to moving forward with essentially breaking down toxic masculinity in the Caribbean and in the wider society of the world.
And Mr. Davidson?
All right, so as Mr. James mentioned, what we have to do is try to continue to get the word out there, right? We need to try to push to meet the men where they are, right? We have a few plans lined up. I should have mentioned also that we at the ministry we started a program called Boys to Men, right? So through programs like that, we're trying to develop the younger guys looking at these issues at a very young stage, primary school, 10, 11, right? And show them, okay, this is what society say masculinity is, but then we giving them a different life. So we already started a program like that. And for the older guys now, we will be trying to push to go out into the communities to to help to meet them where they are and show them give them a different light of what masculinity and men in Grenada should be.
All right, and my colleague and comrade Kitaka.
Well, for me, Kellan, I would say this, like, to all the men who might be viewing, and anyone who's viewing now, and if you have an opportunity to speak to a male, tell them that their health, their physical, mental, emotional, the holistic health is very important, even more important than even making money, having sex, driving cars, or doing any of those things. Like, your health and well-being is important, and you need to see that as being important, and consciously, continuously invest in promoting wellness in those areas of your life. I mean, in relationships or women, you can be more supportive of your men. In families, the parents can be more conscious about how we go about socializing, what we introduce our kids to at that level, because we know that the formative years of a young man plays a critical role in molding him. You understand? The society on a whole, certain behaviors we have to put our foot down on. We cannot just turn our blind eye to a man who is 30-something years old having a relationship with a young lady that is 15. You know, a lot of things that we know for sure is a no-no. Like as a collective society, you have to put our foot down and say, you know, we also have to put our foot down and also provide support and provide help and so on to men when they are going through and intervene so as to not enable the situation to get to crisis level. So I think at the core, love, support, understanding, empathy, and all of those things, you know, need to be, you know, drilled and shared with our men wherever they are. Not in nice fancy forums. Sometimes it's on the block, sometimes it's on the bus, sometimes by the sidewalk, by the rum shop. You know, we have to start those
The
conversations.
barber shop as well. The barber shop. Don't forget the barber shop, my brother.
You know, all those areas. But I think that
Yeah.
is very, very, very critical. And I mean, I would say commitment to doing better for yourself as a man is important, and it's a journey. It's not one size fits all, and you have to be committed to it. And once you do it, you would benefit from being better, and everyone around you will as well.
My brother Kitaka, thank you so much for being on the panel. It's always a joy having you here because I think you distill a lot of very progressive ideas that are needed, that are refreshing for Grenada to hear. So thank you, panel. Thank you to Mr. Davidson. Mr. Davidson, please. We have been trying to get your boss, that's the minister, Delma Thomas, to appear on the report. I'm putting you on the spot here, sir. But just go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, just put in a word
No,
for us whenever you are in a meeting with the goodly minister.
Okay, I'll try my best to relay that message.
All right. And Mr. James from Trinidad and Tobago, thank you, gentlemen, for this very important conversation as we acknowledge and celebrate men. Fun fact, the gentleman who established International Men's Day, pop quiz, does anybody know where he's from?
He's from Trinidad, yeah.
Trinidad.
It's from Trinidad and Tobago, right? So Trinidad is a trailblazer where that is concerned. Now, International Men's Day is celebrated in about 71 countries around the world, and it's increasingly becoming a very important day internationally. So, gentlemen, once again, let me thank you, viewers and listeners. Let me thank you for, again, your patronage of the Bubb Report. I do sincerely apologize for the quality of the production today, as my internet failed me terribly, and we will be working to rectify that for our next episode next week. So thank you for your patience, and viewers and listeners, again, thank you for your continued viewership of the Bubb Report, and we will see you next week for another episode. Bye-bye.